Yeah, we're going to talk about the updates that have happened in TeachingBooks.net. Before I turn it over to Alyssa, I am Janet Lanham. I'm from Library Media Services Department, and our department brings TeachingBooks.net to JCPS, all teachers and students and families. And you can access TeachingBooks.net through your Clever link, or you can, when you access it through Clever, it takes you to the full, robust, all of TeachingBooks.net. If you enter through your school's LibGuide, NTI Online Resources tab, that will take you directly to all of the full text, read aloud picture books, which I think is now over 1,300. And there are also full text middle and high poetry read alouds, and also some full text middle and high chapters, but no full text books, but lots and lots and lots and lots of full read alouds on picture books. So now I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa Yokota-Byron, who is our representative for JCPS from TeachingBooks.net.
Thanks, Janet. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to get to present with you today. I'm so excited to share a little bit about Teaching Books. As Janet said, you all have access to this database, and so we definitely want to make sure that you know how to explore and use it. Right up top, I'll just let you know that I am always available for questions. I'd love to hear from people. So if after this you're thinking, okay, but I have something else that I'm curious about, please do feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from anybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly, and then we can dive in. So, oh, I have to find the right little button there. There it is. Okay, so now you should be seeing my screen. Perfect. And we're talking about Teaching Books resources specifically for the virtual and blended learning, because right now we're having to be a little adaptive with what we're teaching and where we're teaching. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at how do you log in, because that's a really important element, finding those resources, and then virtual teaching ideas. It's really important to know that your access is provided by the JCPS Library Media Services and the wonderful people there, Janet being among them. So reach out to Janet or Jessica Garvin for information. I believe these slides are available to you to get that information later as well. And your access directions. So what this is a student level of login, which means they get access to everything on the site, but they cannot use some of the customizable tools that are particular for educators, like custom reading lists, custom lesson plans, and then some of the sharing tools. But this will get them in from home. Of course, if they're going through Clever, they don't even have to think about it. For you, you'll want to sign in as an educator using your @jefferson.kyschools.us email address, and then you can have access to all of that customized content. So that's the nitty-gritty, but that's kind of the boring stuff. What I want to get to is the juice. Let's go to the site. This is Teaching Books. I know I'm logged in as an educator because it's welcoming my name across the top. If you don't see that, you can open that toggle menu, 3 lines across the top left corner, and above the sign out button, you will see an educator login button. If you see that, go ahead and click on it and use your school email to sign in. The main thing you want to think about with Teaching Books is that this is where I go to find resources that support the books I'm using. While you will not find ebooks on here, you can find a wealth of things that can help you teach those titles, in addition to, as Janet mentioned, complete book readings. So we're going to go through some of that, but I'm just going to start with, let's find something that we can listen to from an author. Say, for instance, that you are reading With the Fire on High, which I know is a Kentucky Bluegrass 9/12 title this year. I would search for that title using our search bar across the center, and now I have access to all of the resources to support it. And we're just going to start out by listening to one of our original resources, which is something we've made in-house. It's our Meet the Author recording with Elizabeth Acevedo, and let's hear what she has to say.
Hey, good people. My name is Elizabeth Acevedo, and I'm the author of With the Fire on High. With the Fire on High is the story of Imani Santiago, who is a teen chef growing up in Philadelphia, and she's also a teen parent. And this story idea actually was a hodgepodge of different things happening at once. I decided I wanted to participate in National Novel Writing Month. I wanted to attempt to write prose and to see if I could complete a project entirely in prose. And the day that I decided that I would be joining National Novel Writing Month was a week before it actually began. And it so happened that I was watching Chopped that evening. And so as I'm thinking about a potential story idea or what I would want to write, I'm also watching this episode where young people are competing on Chopped, which is a Food Network show. And I remember thinking, I know exactly the young person who I want to win. I want to write her. I want to see how she would pit herself against these other competitors. And so initially With the Fire on High was about a young woman who competes on Chopped. And it became a very different narrative when I met Imani Santiago and started thinking about her child and how often we read stories about young people who are deciding whether or not to keep a child. But here was a young woman.
Pause and just skip down just to show you that she continues to talk now about the challenges of writing her character's voice, really wanting it to be authentic, but understanding that it's not an experience that she's had. So this is a wonderful example of a Meet the Author recording. And what's great about these is that you get to get an introduction from the author. They get to tell you about their own book. And I always find such great ideas that I can take back to my students with this. For example, I listen to this and I think, well, I'm really getting to hear some of the ways that she found inspiration. So how am I coming up with new ideas for writing? I listen to this and maybe I want to go, well, we all watch TV, right? So what am I finding from my TV that I can now take a story from? Or maybe when I fall down, I really want to think about character voice. What are the kinds of questions that I need to be asking myself to be authentic to that character, even if it's not my experience? So listen to these recordings and take inspiration for ways that you can pull activities or ideas or conversation starters out of these particular resources. Now, the important piece about these resources is that we need to be able to share them, right? Because I can watch it, but how do I get it to my students, especially when they're home or maybe using this an independent time? That's where I want to use my share tools. And that's this red share arrow underneath the cover image. I open that up and I get to see now QR printables and digital share links that will allow me to put this particular resource in any space that will directly communicate with my students the way that I need it to. I'm going to keep talking about this share box, so don't worry, we'll come back to it. But I just want to point out again that we have this red share arrow, and you look for it all over the site, and that's how you get that access to your students. I want to go back quickly, though, to our title image, because remember, TeachingBooks has resources to support the titles you're using. So we search for With the Fire on High, and what we find is original resources made by TeachingBooks, author interviews, which are great for author studies. You can find book guides, activities, and lessons. So if I want to, for instance, this one has a great reading guide provided by the publisher. I can also create customized lessons because I'm signed in as an educator. You can find book readings. These are actually narrated by the author, which are delightful. Book trailers to get students excited. Vocabulary lists, and more. And if I want to look underneath the book cover, you'll see we also have a link to Google Preview. So if you're wanting to find ways to get students really hooked on titles, but needing a little bit more context maybe, you can get some access to that through those Google Preview links. And that was just by searching for the title With the Fire on High. Maybe though I'm not teaching with high school, and so I want to look at a younger reader. Another title that's on your Bluegrass Awards is the preschool title, Bear Came Along. And before I disappear, I'm going to just quickly show that by searching, what I'm pulling up are not only titles, but anything that aligns to that search for authors and illustrators, lists of words and series, and subject matter. You'll also find things, if I search for those complete book readings I've mentioned so sneakily before, if I search for that, now I get a featured section that also gives me a link to that. And I'm going to come back to this. But we're going to go to Bear Came Along first. So I like Bear Came Along, and I want to find the resources for that. Let's take a listen to this Meet the Author recording, the illustrator, Lei-Wen Pham.
Hi, my name is Lei-Wen Pham, and I'm the illustrator of the book Bear Came Along, written by Richard Morris. When this story first came into my hands, I have to admit I was having a really hard time. It seemed as though all the news was bad news, and every time I opened up a newspaper or turned on the computer, there were just difficult stories facing me. It seemed as though nobody in the world was getting along, and I think I was really looking for a story about happiness, about joy, about coming together, about being together as a group of people, about living together in this world. And then here comes along a book called Bear Came Along, and it seemed to answer all of those questions for me.
Skip ahead a little bit. Listen to this whole thing. It's absolutely delightful. But she talks a little bit about how she creates a 3-page spread without words. And here's where she's going to talk to us about what that really does for her and why she wrote that.
Children. In this particular case, though, right in the middle of the book, there's a moment where Bear has met up with all of his friends. They come to a break in the river. They all look forward, and there's a waterfall. And the way the story is told, it simply says, until, and there's a pause, and the line reads, all the animals tumble down. And for me, I needed to make a pause in that particular moment in the book. I needed to give a moment for the audience to react, for the kids to look and say, oh my gosh, there's a waterfall coming. For the animals to all have a moment of shock on their face, so that the message of the book about all of us coming together, everybody comes together at that exact moment. Not only do the characters in the book come together, but the audience, the people reading the book, the person reading the book aloud, the kids looking at the pictures, everybody is in that precise moment together. And I needed to have that moment prolong itself as much as I could. So I gave it 3 spreads. You can see the animal's face. You can look at what the animals are looking at. And then that very frightening moment where the animals are tiny and the world is enormous. And that moment, to me, is how I want the world to be. I want everyone to know that as enormous as this world is, we are all in it together, and we're tiny in this big world. And when the fall comes, the fall doesn't have to be bad. It can actually turn into quite a happy tumble.
So again, anytime I'm listening to these, I'm always looking for what can I do with this? How can I take this with students and make it not only something to be exciting about the book, but also just to do more with it? In this case, I imagine that this can be a great conversation starter, especially now in these times where a lot is up in the air and it seems like there's something always really challenging right around the corner. So how can we talk together about how we're in it together? What does it mean to be in it together? So using these not just for connections for the titles that you're reading, but also to enhance other conversations that you may be having. Use this in an advisory setting, for instance. Certainly using picture books beyond younger readers. I love using picture books with high school grade kids. They love it too. They get so excited. And if you make it really about the conversation, you can do so much with them. But I want to make sure that I get this to those students. And now you're going to recall that we talked about that red share arrow. And that is just underneath the cover image again here. I'm going to select that. And perhaps what I want to do is I want to prompt students to engage in this conversation on their own. So maybe I'll actually assign this via Google Classroom. I select it there, I give them a little question prompt, and then they have to answer back as part of their assignment. Or you can embed it in a classroom page maybe that you have. Just so you know, anytime I use these share links, students will not have to sign in. Again, if they're getting through Clever, it's okay, they'll already be authenticated. But if they're accessing it or their families are accessing it just through the link alone, they will not have to sign in to access this particular resource. Now, if they navigate away from this page, they'll be prompted to sign in, but your access information is always available to share with them as well, and they can get it through Clever. So those are some things for sharing. What's another example of what we can do with virtually engaging our students? One thing I want to think about is also, maybe we talked a little bit about writing prompts with the Fire on High. Another one, I really just spent some time with your state booklets today, and they all have delightful resources. So I highly recommend you exploring those, and I'll show you where those are. But this is another one. And this Meet the Author recording, I love. It is so, it just brings up so much. So now I'm going to prompt you to think about what you might do with this as you listen.
Hi, this is Lynn Kelly, and I'm the author of Song for a Whale. I'm going to tell you a bit about how I came to write this book, and then I'll share an excerpt with you. I learned about the 52 hertz whale who sings at a frequency other whales don't understand. Most whales sing at a frequency of about 10 to 20 hertz, and this whale sings at a frequency that's too high for other whales, about 52 hertz. For humans, it's still a low sound, but it's too high for a whale. He's been out there that we know of for at least 30 years, singing this song that only he sings with no response from any other animal. I was fascinated right away with him, and then couldn't stop thinking about him and decided to write about him. And then I decided I needed to come up with a character who would be just as fascinated with this whale as I was, and who would feel compelled to get up and do something, to reach out to this whale and let him know that someone hears him. And that's when I came up with the character of Iris. Like many deaf people I've met in my work as a sign language interpreter, she's the only deaf student at her school. So there really isn't anyone she can talk to at school, and things aren't so great at home either. So when she learns about this whale in her science class, she decides that she needs to do something to find him.
I'll pause this there. And again, I encourage you to listen to the rest of it because it's really lovely. Hopefully you are coming up with all kinds of ideas on what you might do with this particular lesson plan. For me, I'm sorry, not lesson plan, Meet the Author recording. For me, what I hear is a writing prompt where I can have students now think about maybe things that make us unique. Create two characters who are unique and totally independently their own, and talk about how they can come together. Write a story where they come together and they're celebrating those differences. They get to connect because of the things that make them different from others, maybe, or just special. And so getting to use this as a way to get inspiration from that. You also can take a really great lesson to collaborate with a science lesson and say, find a story about an interesting animal, and maybe one that is an outlier from the other animals like them. What do we know about them? So having students learn how to do a little research based on this as well. Again, you can always share those tools. Maybe what I want to do now is I actually want to send students that maybe have access to this title through classroom sets or whatever you're using. Then you can print label sheets or make a shelf talker. And what they'll then see is a QR code. You print this out and cut this up, and then they just instantly have access to this Meet the Author recording. I'm looking at the book, I want to know a little about it, and I can just listen to it right there. So using those share tools for a number of ways to really increase this time of having to be flexible with virtual use and in-person use as well. I want to make sure I note also, you may have noticed that there's a transcript for this recording, and the transcript tracks along as you listen. Well, you can translate this page as well using the Google Translate function at the top right corner of the page into any language available through Google Translate. So if I wanted to translate this into Spanish, for example, I select Spanish, and now the text on the page is translated. The audio itself will remain in the spoken language, but the text will be translated. Of course, it's Google Translate, so it's imperfect, but it is something that can really help if you have students who maybe are learning Spanish or students who speak Spanish as a first language and for whom this might be helpful. And the same goes with sharing with families. They want to have more access to the titles that your students are reading. This can kind of help bring them into that as well. And that Google Translate was a drop-down menu from the top right corner of any page. Okay, there's a ton more that I want to share, but I want to be mindful of our time. And the things I want to make sure I point out, besides looking at those resources we saw, are again, you can get access to complete book readings just by searching for complete book readings. And here you'll find pre-K-12 complete book readings. This is not just picture books. We do have the full range of grade levels represented. And if we look at, let's say, our upper level readers, what you'll find here are not only poems read in full, but it looks like we're feeling a little slow today. Well, you'll find not only poems read in full, but you'll also find books like, I know a lot of our classics are read in full, some Shakespeare titles are read in full, so you will find those complete book readings across grade levels, and that can be a really helpful access tool as well. And the filter results that I'm using are these left side options. Sadly, we're feeling a little busy today. TeachingBooks is getting really popular in this virtual time, which is wonderful, but when you explore on your own, you will get to see that. Hopefully, this will take me there. There we go. So the other area I wanted to show you is for educators. It's this right across the top. Explore this on your own because there's a lot to discover in here. For instance, I know we're all really wanting to make sure diverse books are highlighted in our spaces, and so you can find a whole way to explore diverse titles through this. But I'm going to take us right now to virtual teaching ideas. Virtual teaching ideas will be where you can come to find quick ideas where you're thinking, okay, I think I like TeachingBooks. I think it's really great, but I'm a little overwhelmed by the options. Can somebody help me just get started? These virtual teaching ideas can be good, quick, kind of in your back pocket options. For instance, you might discover under intermediate, we've created a whole calendar of ideas for you, September timely topics. And ideas at a moment's notice, if I look at my September ideas, you will have a PDF option with quick access to titles for broken down by grade level and themes. And this is excellent for those rainy days or just the, oh no, today I have been thrown into maybe a different role, wearing a different hat than normal. Grab some quick ideas here. And we're going to work to kind of keep these fresh for you each month. These are written out for pre-K to 8, but you can always find inspiration for using these at the upper grade levels as well. And that was from For Educators, Virtual Teaching Ideas. And the last thing I want to make sure I point out before I show you where your reading lists are is something that we've actually created off the site, but you can take as sort of an idea for yourself. And that is using Google Slides to create virtual classrooms or libraries. I'm sure you've seen this. I know this is circulating a lot right now, but these Bitmoji spaces, right? What we've done is we've created a slide using fun Bitmojis, and then we've linked each of the covers to different resources. Maybe you want students to explore poetry. You can create your poetry tasting this way. It's fun, it's interactive. Or you want to set up a history class. Everything on here is clickable. Same goes for science. I select my microscope, and now I get taken to a book reading about microscopes, and it's fun and it's interesting. So there's a lot of ways that you can get creative, all again using these share tools to link to wherever best meets your teaching needs right now. So really kind of taking those ideas of what you're finding in TeachingBooks and dropping it into the spaces that work best for you. All right, the last thing I promised I'd show you are your reading lists. Back on my toggle menu, I'm going to go to your reading lists. And here's where you'll find those Kentucky State lists. So we've updated these for 2020, 21. Tons of great resources here. Definitely take some time exploring that. And as you can see, you could always make your own as well. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions I can answer.
I have not seen anything pop up in the chat box. Have you, Jim?
No, ma'am.
Okay, great. Janet, is there anything else you'd like me to show?
I don't think so. I think you pretty much hit all the highlights. If you would show them just the lesson plan real quickly, how they can use the lesson plan templates.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So what's another title I have? Maybe you're teaching Look Both Ways. I go to the title. I'm going to scroll down, pull up my lesson plans. In addition to any lesson plans that we've found external to TeachingBooks, we also have these that you can create. So for instance, if I wanted to have a cultural representation reflection, or I consider the representation within this title, I'll select that. And because these are multi-leveled, what this supports is scaffolding as well as differentiation. So if I look at a sample of what this can look like, let's say level 3. Now you have options to consider the text with what's in the book and what do I see in my world, just so I can kind of think about what I notice. And then maybe we're going to consider what about these identities or experiences did I notice in the text? Moments of privilege, power, and or bias from the text within these communities or experiences. And then what's nice is that this last question that does not highlight well, but you can adjust that to whatever your needs are. It is available as a sample. I'll show you how that shows up. So if I go to my level 3 to create here, now this is that question. So I can edit this to whatever I need, and then it will show up in that last space on the custom questions. And if you create one, once you create one, it will appear here. So you actually you do see your lessons here. It will show up under your lessons. I've already made some for myself. If you don't see it, it's okay. It just means you haven't made one yet. So that's where those are. And we have them for story maps, which go to fiction, text, and nonfiction read and respond options as well.
So once you make your lesson and you have that, then you can just share that with the awesome share options and send it to your Google Classroom as an assignment?
Absolutely. So let me
that is
go
amazing.
ahead. We'll take this giver one, for instance, and I'll select share. And I have all the same options. The only thing you may not see is those shelf talkers. Just so you know, the way we distinguish that is shelf talkers only show up for resources that talk. So those are going to be your Meet the Author recordings, book trailers, etc.
Thank you so much today, Alyssa. You really covered everything from A to Z. And again, Alyssa is always available to help with any questions or demonstrate anything to your school. And then we at Library Media Services are always ready to help you, as is your school librarian who's really experienced with TeachingBooks.net too.